Hi everybody. I know it has taken me a long time to put together this video, but I just haven't wanted to sit down and do it because remembering all these bad times with men all in a row is mentally a lot. And I would rather remember all the amazing things that happened 95% of the time in the views and the climbs and the challenges. But it is really important that I get this information out there because no one else is putting it out there. And I find that so dangerous, not only that we're unprepared, but that men are being enabled by our unpreparedness. So I want to fix all that. I don't want to scare you from the trail. I'm not doing that at all. I'm not telling you don't hike the trail. I'm telling you, hike the trail safely by using this knowledge to your advantage. I want you prepared. I want you to think about the type of things that happen and what you would do in that situation that would help you. And I also want to sort out some bad advice that is commonly mentioned in female thru hiker videos that I found was wrong. I didn't apply at all, and I thought it was more unsafe than just sticking things out, and we'll get to that. But ultimately, this is not supposed to be a scary video. It's supposed to be one to prepare you, and I hope it helps you have a safe hike. So the first thing I want to talk about, number one, going Nobo from Springer Mountain, actually Amicalola, up to the top of the Smokies when I was in the Nobo direction in the bubble. Biggest issue there were Privy Peekers and Peeping Toms. And this tended to happen when you got to shelter areas at night where people would congregate. The privies usually would be high up on a hill. And when that was a situation, you didn't want to climb up that hill and go to a privy without making sure no one was in it first, because you'd hiked all day. But the bottom of the privies are cut out and you can see feet in it, which is really handy because then you can look up there and go, oh yeah, someone's in there, I'm not going. So there's no mistakes made. People don't line up outside of privies. They know they're not very private. Everyone gives you your space. So know now, if anyone's coming toward that privy, it's not acceptable to be lining up outside a door. They shouldn't be doing it. And I never saw that behavior ever. But the 3 times that privy locks were broken, and it was at the start of the trail where the hook and eyes were broken or missing, those were the only 3 times that men tried to come up to the privy. So I'm assuming that they already knew that they had arrived before me or used the privy before me, knew that hook and eye latch was broken, and didn't even think about it until later they saw a woman go up there and they thought, oh, I'm going to accidentally open the door because I'm going to pretend I don't know. And they're forgetting that the same way they can see our feet, we can see them coming up the hill. You can see people approaching. It's not that tight of a building. So they're just not thinking, they're being opportunistic. So when they get about 30 feet away, I would holler out. Well, first I'd start moving the feet and go, okay, I'm moving the feet. And they would ignore that. And I said, oh, they definitely know I'm in here. So why are they coming? Oh, the latch is broken. And again, this only happened when the latches were broken on the privies. But I would just call out when they got 30 feet away. Don't be shy. They're counting on that. And say, hey, I'm in here. And at that point, it's no longer an accident. So at that point, they'll go, oh, and turn away. It's never an, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. It's always an oh, and a grunt and a walk away. They'll do it at night too. If they're in the shelter with you and you go out the shelter, they know you're heading up there. They'll, you'll see the light coming. I'm like, I'm in a privy with a headlamp on. How do you not know that someone's in the privy when your headlamp is on? You do have to call out when that happens. Don't let them get too close and deter the behavior. Same goes in the hotel room. I had somebody in a hotel room attempt to open a bathroom door. Always lock your bathroom door, even if you're only with another woman and you know her. If they ever open a door to talk to hikers in the hallway, which is very common, someone could end up in your hotel room. So whenever you're using the bathroom or the shower, lock the door. And I'm happy to say no one was ever successful at opening a hotel door or a privy door, but it had been tried multiple times. So if you're thinking, oh, that's not too dangerous though, it's just peeking, what's the harm in that? Well, the same is true of, peeping toms. A lot of times you get to a shelter and you want to get dressed and not have to do it in your sleeping bag. So you'll say, hey, I'm going to go behind the shelter. Can everyone stay here? And everyone will say yes. And you go behind the shelter and change. Well, that was very effective when you're with women and there'd be like a bunch of men and one other woman and you go, I'm going to go behind. The other women would stay there. So if anyone, they won't even try to go back and peep on you because they know the woman's going to speak up and say, hey, she's back there changing, right? So that there's other people there watching curbs bad behavior. And there were times where one time we were 4 women, which was unusual. Usually it's like 1 woman for every 10 men. But when you're in the bubble, there can be occasions. And I was in one night with 4 women and 1 guy. And he sat at the edge while we all changed behind him, not peeking at all, doing this. And he was really great. There's a lot of really great men out there who are never going to give you any trouble, but there's always one. And unfortunately, there's always one at every campsite, at least. And there's always one troublemaker in a hotel, in a hostel. It's that guy. And it's multiple that guys. So one time I was in a shelter, and I got comfortable doing this because I always had a watchdog, and I never thought about that. Where I'm going back to change, there's someone here who's got my back. But I was at a place where it was just me and one other person, a man at the time, and I was doing all of my camp chores. Didn't think anything of it. And I said, hey, I'm going to go behind the shelter and change so I don't have to change in the sleeping bag. And he was an older guy, clean cut. I mean, I'm not like, this is not someone you would look at and think, oh, creepo, but he was. And I said, I'm going to go behind the shelter and change. Can you stay here? Yes, I can. I grabbed all my stuff. I said, don't come back. He said, I promise I won't. I'm going to sit right here till you get back. I went behind the shelter, got changed within like 45 seconds. I'm really quick because I don't trust anybody. And sure enough, as soon as I got into that clothes, he came around the corner of the shelter, eyes already on me. It wasn't like he turned and, looking right there, holding his bear bag. And I go, what are you doing? I just said I was coming back here to change. Of course, I'm fully changed. And he goes, oh, well, I have to put this in the bear locker with his bear bag. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I can't believe I forgot everything. It was, oh, but I have a reason to, see? And I just said, you told me you weren't coming back. What are you talking about? You got to put that in the bear. He just took off up the hill to his tent site. Like, he realized he'd been caught. His plan didn't work. He's gone. This is somebody who earlier was telling me about his wife and kids. And those are the worst offenders. And all the women said it. When you have the weekend hiking man or the week long there with his buddies, and they're getting away from the wife and kids, and they always lead with that. Like, I'm getting away from the wife and kids. And some of the women and I were saying, why do we have the most trouble with these guys? And why do they always lead with, I've got wife and kids? I said, that's to make you feel comfortable. It's to give you a false sense of security. If I'm a married guy with kids, I'm not going to peep on you when you go behind the building. And I was really lucky. I moved really quick, and he did not catch me. And again, is that behavior dangerous? No, but it's gateway behavior. And what I found was these same guys, these same sort of people, were doing more than that, and they were openly admitting it when they were away from the group. So I was walking on the trail, and I passed by a man, and he just kind of talked in passing, and pretty soon he was telling me how he watches women step off trail to go to the bathroom. And I said, well, what are you doing watching that for? Give people their privacy and keep on walking. And he said, well, I don't watch, I just can't look away. And I said, that's watching. What is wrong with you? And he goes, well, at night, he thought he should tell me more. He said, at night, I watch women changing in their tent with the red light on so I can see the silhouette show. And when they go to the bathroom and pee in the vestibule, I watch that. And he went into some descriptive language and even started acting things out for me. And I was like, okay, I don't want to talk about this anymore. We're done. And I did warn other women about him and said, don't tent next to this guy. So women, as something to think about, when you're getting to shelter sites and you're setting your tent up, you're immediately in this culture of immediately set up your bed and in the shelter, or set up your tent and set up your bedding and everything. But it might be better to put your backpack down and claim your tent site, but not necessarily pitch your tent until you see where the chips fall and kind of see who's pitching around you and do you want them near you. You could always tell someone you have a friend coming and can you if another woman coming and you want to camp there, and you can easily get men to move along if they're not the right one. But like I said, maybe it's not the best idea all the time, which I learned in retrospect, to pitch the tent right away, but kind of hold out and see, is this a good spot or not? Because there were some times where, yeah, creepy men did kind of set up pretty close, and I had to be extra careful about, stuff. Which is, I'm laughing now, but it really wasn't funny. So this guy also tried to, and many men were trying to get women's bear bags, which was really strange to me at the time. They go, hey, you don't have to hang your bear bag. Just give it to me and I'll put it in my tent. I'm not afraid of a bear. And women who were afraid to hang their bear bags because they hadn't done it much yet were like, yeah, okay, that's great. That solves my problem. And when this guy, PP boy here, went to me, he was an older guy too, came to me and said, why don't you give me your bear bag so that you don't have to hang it? I said, no, I think I'd rather hang it. No, Because all I could think of is, what is this creepo going to be doing with my bear bag in his tent? I don't even want to imagine. Or is he going to get off on the fact that tomorrow morning I have to go to him and ask for permission to get my things back from him? You know, I just didn't like it. Even after I hung the bear bag, he tried to get me to take it down and give it to him. He was really trying to get that bear bag. I don't know why. But again, a lot of men did this. Learn how to hang your bear bag, even if you have to do it on trail. It's fine. Everybody has to learn it. Even if I knew how to do it at home, it's a little different on the trail actually doing it. Just do it. Don't give your gear to anybody. Keep control of your own gear. So, well, is that dangerous behavior? Well, I don't know. This guy starts following people off in the woods to watch them go to the bathroom. How safe is that for you? Do you want that happening? It's red flag behavior, and worse behaviors were to come. So there are also men manipulating women out there, trying to divide them up. There's not many of them. So when you're sticking together, and these guys will tell you, and I had this happen, and other women had it happen too, and it was the same guy doing it. He would go to women and say, that woman is talking about you, and she said this. And then you'd go to the woman and go, you didn't say this, did you? Is he lying? And they were like, what? Oh my gosh. No. And the reaction from them was very reaffirming that they had no idea this was going on. But he was dividing women apart because women stick together. And when you see, like, this is the Peeping Toms saying, let me break up the women so that no one's looking out for you, so I can sneak up on you and open a bathroom door. It's all goes together. And who knows what's coming if you stick around long. If you're the woman, and there were women, eventually they divvy you up and they've got you. Well, what's the next plan? I don't know, but I'm not going to be that woman. You know, I stuck with the sisterhood and talked to the women and said, I don't like this guy. And they said, I don't either. I thought it was just me. So any kind of person you meet at Walmart, they're on the trail. So there are some really great guys out there, and there's some really creepy, manipulative, red flag behavior going on out there. And you just have to know it and move away from it. And having pepper spray is a really good backup to when you do have to put your foot down. And one of these people tried to get me to go off trail with him because he lied and told me it's some marks on a stone were Native American marks, saying that there was water down the side trail. This is an unblazed side trail, looked like a game trail to me. And I said, no, I'm not going off trail with you. And I said, and those are not Native American scratches. Those are trucker pole scratches on a rock. What are you talking about? Oh, no. You're not really experiencing the Appalachian Trail if you don't explore the side trails with me. And I said, my husband is watching me right now on Garmin maps. He sees where I am on a satellite. He's watching me on Far Out when I check in. He knows right where I am. If he starts seeing me go off on a trail somewhere, he's going to know something is wrong, and I'm not going to do that to him. I am not stepping off trail with some man I don't know. And I really had to get firm with him because I thought I could take him. And I had to get firm and say, no, I'm not doing that. But he tried it. And this is the guy that watched people pee, trying to get you off in the middle of the woods by yourself. You know, it was just creepy, bad behavior. So then we get to a worse behavior. Is my first time at a hostel. I was alone. I went into town, and when the guy brought me back, he was new. He was an old man who never had a hostel before. He didn't know what he was doing, and that was part of the problem. And then I come back, and there's this guy there, and I'm just going to say, to make a point, the job he had was similar to a prison guard. And that's just important so you understand the kind of personality, mentality this man had. He was not a nice guy, and he wasn't a prison guard, but his line of work was very similar to that. And he was just when I had my earbuds in and I was doing my own thing and prepping my bear bag, I'd already resupplied, was packing things up and getting ready for the next morning. He kept walking up and saying, like, pull out the earbud, pull out the earbud. And I said, what? And he goes, I have 2 boats. And I'm like, okay, no, don't put that in. Listen to me, I want to talk to you. I have things I want to tell you. And he would do this, just listen to me, I'm talking to you. I have anger management issues. You don't want to make me angry. I have avoided my military psych evals that I've been ordered to take, and I've been dodging that. And, you know, and I'm like, is that a threat? Or are you angry? Am I making you angry? He goes, well, you should listen to me when I talk. And I'm like, well, I kind of want to zone out here. And he's like, no, let me tell you stuff. And after a while, he didn't even acknowledge when I would say something. I'm going, yeah, you know what? You don't want to hear any of this. He would just keep talking and talking. Like, he doesn't even hear me anymore. He just wants to talk at me, and you're going to listen to me, lady. And at dinner, I'm just kind of sitting at the table with this guy talking about men are predators and women are prey. And it just got really bad. And at one point, it went too far. And I said, you know what? I don't want to talk anymore. We don't have the same point of view. I'm a humanitarian, and this has gone too far. No. And he snapped, and he said, you know, this is why you're hiking alone, and no one on the East Coast, the entire East Coast likes you, and in my part of the country, they wouldn't like you. You know who might like you? The weirdos on the coast of California. They might want you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, who is this person? I don't even know this guy, and he's snapping on me like he knows everything about me. And all I could, I kind of walked away and thought, he's clearly talking about himself. Nobody likes him, and nobody, here or there, and nobody wants him, but he's projecting that onto me. But this is all crazy anyway. And now I'm in a hostel where it's basically half of a house, and the owner's on the other half, and it's just the two of us, and I'm supposed to sleep in a room with this guy tonight. Like, it was really scary, and I ended up sleeping on the couch. When he was in the living room, when he finally went to bed, I got up and went out on the couch. What I should have done, and what you should do, is know that these hostel owners are your friends, and they've got your back. They're really, really great. This one old guy was the only guy who had no clue what he was doing. But I know, had I been thinking proper, I could have walked outside, knocked on his door, and said, you know what, I'm resupplied. Bring me back to the trail. And he would have done it. But I will say, any other hostel owner, if I said, hey, there's a creepy guy, I don't want to stay in the same room, they would have said, do you want to pitch your tent in the backyard? Can I bring you back to the trail? Do you want me to bring you to a hotel? And they'd probably refund you to do it and say, or sleep on the sofa. They would help you solve the problem. I was with the one guy who didn't, but still, if I had been thinking and known and in my element and known what to do. So this is one of the scripts that I give you so that you know. If you're in a hostel and somebody is being hostile, go to the hostel owners and let them know and say, I just don't feel comfortable, and give them the option to help you, because they will. And they will say, let me put you somewhere else. Let's switch your room. You want to pitch your tent outside? Do you want me to bring you back to the trail? And you're probably already resupplied at that point. I was, but I just hadn't thought of it. So that's what I want you to think of, is you can leave these situations. You don't have to stay at the hostel when the guy gets all crazy on you. The day that I hiked the roller coaster, it was like 5 miles and then 16 miles through the roller coaster. It was like a 21-mile day. And I arrived at the Rod Hollow shelter exhausted. And I got there, and there was one guy there, and he had been living there for days, even though in that area there's a sign in the shelter saying you can only stay at the shelter one night. He was clearly spread out, and he had been there for days. And he was in this depressive, desperate situation where he had lost his son, and it was very unclear what he was even saying and describing. But he just, as soon as he saw me, he latched on. I was like, oh my gosh. And he started going into this whole thing of how he was there trying to recover from this son passing. And let me go into the details of the accident and the investigation. And I'm sitting there going, what the heck have I just walked into? I get to camp. I'm exhausted. I've been hiking 21 miles through the roller coaster, and now I'm trying to eat and cook and do laundry, and I have this guy just going at it about how his life is ruined and what should he do, and like I'm his therapist or something, and I'm really not saying anything. I'm just kind of go, am I creeping you out? I'm probably scaring you, and I should probably stop. But let me tell you one more thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what is this? And I'm the only one here. And these other thru hiker videos, you've probably seen them, where the women go, hey, don't worry. If you're ever in a situation where there's some scary camper, all you have to do is pick up and go to the next site. Well, the next shelter site was like 15 miles away, because they're spaced pretty far apart in some areas. And a stealth site is not really stealthy. They're just these little flat areas on the side of the trail. It's not stealthy at all. It's just a side campsite. I'm going to get to more of that later, why that's not really a great idea either. But I'm too exhausted. Like, I have not another step in me. I'm tired and I want to go to bed. And he set up a tent and I set up a shelter. But this is really, for about an hour, out of control. This guy just spilling his guts in desperation, that's ready to snap into anger. Like, I feel that coming. Like, boy, this guy feels like he's on the verge of the insurance company anger here and snapping on me. And his behavior was really odd, and the way he was moving was really odd, and I really didn't like it. And if I'd had pepper spray, I would have slept so much better that night, but I just barely slept at all, until he finally fell asleep and I could hear him snoring in his tent. But it was a really bad situation, and pepper spray was really the only answer for it, or having a hiking partner to camp at the same site. Because if I'd been there with my husband, It would have been like, hey, can you leave us alone? And that would have been that, you know. But when you're alone in a woman and you're saying anything to these men, and I'd already learned it by then, when you say to these men, hey, you know what, no, they go, like he said, he goes, am I scaring you? Yeah, well, I'm going to keep talking anyway. You know, they don't care what your answer is. They're going to keep doing it. But now they're probably getting off on the fact that they're scaring you and making you uncomfortable, and that validation. So that was just a really bad situation that the only help would have been camping with a partner and or pepper spray. And I would say both would be ideal in that situation because this guy was a mess. Another really bad situation that happened was I stayed in town overnight at a hotel, and in the morning I arranged for a shuttle driver and his dog, because it said so-and-so and his dog, to pick me up and bring me to the grocery store to resupply and then go to the trail. And I thought, this is great. I haven't seen my dog in a while. This would be really nice. So he picks me up in the morning and he has no dog. And I immediately text my husband and I go, this is like Criminal Minds, where the guy in the park looking for his dog, you know, maybe the guy wants you to pick off the list, him to drive you because he's got a dog and that's alluring, but there's no dog. So I texted my husband the license plate number and I said, boy, it just is making the hairs in the back of my neck stand up. And I don't really know why. But we get to the grocery store. Most hostel owners, in fact, every hostel owner shuttle driver I was ever with, waited in the parking lot and said, hey, you know, 35, 40 minutes. You go, yeah, whatever, 45 minutes. And you go in, and either they run their own errands and come back for you, or they sit in the car and wait for you sometimes, make some phone calls. A couple of times they went in shopping too and then just met you back, but you never really saw them in the store unless it was by accident. But this guy, this shuttle driver, I went in the store, he went in behind me, and he started like following behind me in the aisles. So I'm picking out foods, and he's standing right there next to me. And I said, I'm really only going to be 15 minutes. And he goes, yeah, take your time. And he stood behind me, and I thought this was so strange. I hurried up and grabbed and moved to the next aisle, and then he comes to the next aisle. And it's just kept happening. And I actually tried calling my daughter from the store because I really wanted to hear a voice at that point, but there was no cell inside of the store. So I was on my own, and I just kind of hurried around and grabbed up everything I needed and got to the register. He came over and slid his card without asking to kind of give you the 20-cent discount. And then, which was kind of weird because usually people will do that, but they'll usually ask you, do you want my card? But he actually came in and slid it for me. And it was just too much, too close. And I was really uncomfortable. And then as I was going through the double doors to leave the store, and he was behind me, there was another woman there with her own car, and he stopped to help her. And she said, thank you. And he said, yeah, just don't let my wife know. And I stopped at the second double door and I said, did this guy just call me his wife to that other woman? And I turned back and looked at him, and he realized he'd been caught. And he said, oh, did you hear me call you my wife to that woman? I said, I'm married and have a husband. You're not my husband. No, I was just joking. And I went, okay, don't do that. And I walked out the door, and I was thinking in every bit of my being, I really should call another shuttle driver to pick me up, and I should dump this guy. This is really creepy what he's been doing in the store. And now I find out he's pretending I'm his wife, and who knows who else he told in that store that I didn't hear that he's shopping with his wife. Like, what is this? It's so bizarre. I can't even put a finger on it. It's so bizarre. So I was thinking I really should do it, but I might have to wait hours to get another shuttle driver, and I really just want to get back to the trail. I should have waited the hours and called another shuttle driver, and that is my advice to you. Because he knew, like, what's she gonna do? She needs a ride back to the trail. I repacked all my stuff and my groceries, threw it away, the packaging away, packed at the backpack. He still had to drive me, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes to the trail. And on the way, his behavior at that point got worse with the, I would pick up on you if I saw you hitchhiking, you're a beautiful woman, you're so fit, you're so blah, blah, blah. Is this inappropriate? And just on and on and on and on. And you have to be really careful when men ask me, is this appropriate or not? I'd be like, I don't know what they're looking for here, for validation, or am I scaring you? That was it. Am I making you uncomfortable was a big one. And I always didn't want men to know when they were making me uncomfortable, when it was just me and them. So I would usually not answer the question and not give them that kind of power. But it was so bizarre. And I finally got to the trail and kind of went off running and never looked back. But if you ever have a list of shuttle drivers and there's an opportunity for women where there's a woman shuttle driver, and there are sometimes, always go with the woman driver whenever you can. When you're with male shuttle drivers and they behave badly, just get out of the car and call somebody else, even if you have to wait. Now, I know a lot of these towns don't have Ubers. So if you're thinking I'm going to get an Uber, a lot of them didn't have Ubers. Also, I found some shuttle drivers lie and say there are no Ubers because they want the money. So even though a shuttle driver tells you there's no Ubers in the area, check, because sometimes there were Ubers in the area. But the biggest problem with men, when you're in the bubble, it tends to be little things that they can get away with until they get you one-on-one alone in an area. They can get a little creepier and try to lure you off the trail. But when I was ahead of the bubble, outside the bubble, and not bumping into as many people, and I was in Virginia, I bumped into a lot of weekend and week-long section hikers on the AT, not intending to knock out the whole AT, but just hiking at a section. And I was at the Paul Wolf shelter. I had finished all my camp chores. I had videoed everything and had a really good time. Decided to sleep in the shelter because it was so nice. I decided not to sleep in a tent so I could get up early in the morning and climb the next mountain. And I was all wrapped up, and they came up, these 4 guys, into the Paul Wolf shelter. There's a picnic table there, really loud, and I just kind of roll, and they started asking me questions, even though I'm in my sleeping bag, and I kind of roll over and look at them, and I say, hey, it's hiker midnight, and they go, we don't believe in hiker midnight because, you know, we're just here for the week, getting away from our wife and kids, and we always do this every spring and fall. And then they start bragging about boats and colleges, and it was just really clear they're wingmanning each other and just throwing in as many random money facts as they can, which I always think is ridiculous. That's one of the biggest thing they do when they hit on you, is they talk about everything that they have. And we're all living minimally, going, I'm trying to live without all these things and just have a few things in my backpack, and I don't really want to hear about all your stuff. But they went on about how disgusting the shelter was, and why was I sleeping here? I should be down pitching my tent where they were, around the beautiful fire ring down the hill, and, you know, what are you doing? And you should come with us. I'm like, no, I'm set up here. I don't want to. And then they went down the hill, and I thought, thank God they're gone. And then one of them came back up, and he's like, you should come back and hang out with us and it just went on. And I couldn't, when I told them, hey, I want to go to sleep, it was as if I wasn't saying anything at all. They just pretended I wasn't even speaking at that point, which is what a lot of them do when you're out there. These men that you bump into, it's like you have no voice. You're not a human being. You're an object to them, and they're trying to tame you and control you and get you to listen to them. These lonely men who have no one to listen to them, because they're stupid. I don't want to listen to them. I don't want to listen about your boats. This is what they do. And they just harass women in shelters. So they came up, and even though that shelter is so disgusting, and there's probably norovirus everywhere, which they weren't, it was a beautiful shelter. They tried to get me out of that shelter, and when I wouldn't go, each one of them came up to cook their meal in that shelter. Well, if it's so gross, why are you coming up here to eat at the picnic table here? Because then they can hit on me the whole time, you know, and no matter how, like I said, no matter how many times I said, hey, I just want to sleep and I don't want to talk. Yeah, okay. So the ringleader of them all, when it was his turn, he actually brought chocolate milk. He stepped up into the shelter and went up to the second tier where I was sleeping, which was really invasive, like a bold move. And if I'd had pepper spray, it would have been out and it would have been done. Like, it would have been like, don't you come no closer. But he made it all the way to me, and I was like, what's going on? And he set down a chocolate milk in front of me and said, this is the best trail magic you're ever going to have. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's disgusting. You know, my immediate thought is, what is going on? It's so outside. You don't think, women, this is going to happen. Like, who is going to put down chocolate milk and tell you this is the best you're ever going to have? It was so creepy, disgusting. And I said, you know what? I don't want that, because I'll have to carry the garbage. That was immediately my hiker response to it, is I don't want to have to carry the empty garbage. He turned back around and apologized for saying this, but he looked at me, and the micro expression on his face when I said I didn't want the milk was, what'd you fucking say to me? Like, he turned on me, and I was like, holy, what's going on here? And then he kind of backed up because he realized I caught what was going on. And he said, you know what, just drink the milk and leave the empty milk container on the picnic table, and I'll pick it up for you in the morning and I'll carry it out. And it was like that, you bitch, was kind of at the end of it in that tone. And I was like, you know what? Like you said earlier, there's norovirus everywhere, and I don't accept food from other hikers, which is true. I said, so I don't want this. And he said, just drink it. And he walked away, and he went down the hill. And I just went, there's the true colors right there. You're all fun and games until you say no to me, and then I got a problem with you, right? I ended up, like, later that night putting it on the picnic table and leaving it there. I'm like, I am not drinking that disgusting chocolate milk he's probably had in his pack for 3 days. I wouldn't have it if he had a refrigerator and it was iced. I don't want your chocolate milk. But that brought me to the advice that through hiker women will tell you is, oh, if you do have trouble on the trail, you can just pack up your things and move along. And problem solved. And I went in there thinking that's what I'll do. And I quickly learned way before this moment that after you hike, whatever max miles I don't care if it's 5 miles or 25 miles, when you're done at the end of the day, you're done at the end of the day. So the last thing that I wanted to do was to pack everything up, spend a half hour packing everything up, hike a couple more miles to find a stealth campsite to reset everything up because you're too exhausted. But the second part of that is they're stalking out there. And the last thing I want is this guy to follow me off. Like I'm going to go 2 miles in the middle of the woods where there are no other people around, and this bozo follows me there, and now I'm alone in the woods. At least at a shelter site or a major campsite, other thru hikers will usually come through, and they did later around 8, 9 o'clock. You'll get 1 or 2s more coming into tent. If you're alone in the woods somewhere, and no one coming, so when they tell you to remove and move on, shelters are often 5 to 15 miles apart, and going off aimlessly into the dark is not necessarily a great idea, especially if somebody follows you. Or they could. I won't say they will, but they could, and it's not unheard of. So not the best advice there, unless there was a way to get off trail. Like if I had known, there wasn't, but if there had been a road to town a couple miles away and I could get a shuttle on the phone and I could go, all right, I'm going to pick up and go. And that way, when I walk by, these guys go, hey, where are you going? You can just know they're not going to follow you because you're going to make it to a road and you're going to go safely into town. But really think of, is going further off into the wilderness the better idea? What if one of these guys follows me? What if chocolate milk follows me to a remote trail side somewhere? I mean, that's just not a great plan. So will people stalk you? Yeah. I was one time hiking in the Smoky Mountains weeks before this incident. I was going up a hill and I passed by a male hiker who was pretty much hacking up a lung on the trail. He was really sick. And we kind of went, hey, and kept on going. And I stopped for lunch at a shelter, and there was another woman there. And we both had our lunch together, and we were talking. And eventually this guy hacked his way up the mountain. He said he knew her. He had seen her before, and he waved to her, hey, how you doing? And she kind of, oh, yeah. And he's, what's wrong? He goes, I'm ready to die. I'm so sick. And he goes, I can't go another step more. And he goes inside the shelter, and we hear him kind of unpacking and blowing up his sleeping bag and kind of crawling into bed. And we're having lunch, and he calls out to her, oh, you're sleeping here tonight, right? And she goes, no. And she looks at me and she goes, no. And she was signaling me to don't stay here. And I was like, I got the message. Okay. And he goes, well, where are you staying? And she said, I'm going to go 5 miles more to the next shelter. And I thought, oh, that was a mistake. Don't tell men where you're going. That wasn't a good idea. I was also going 5 miles up the trail, which she didn't know. But he was in the bed. We finished eating. We both head up. I got there before her. I start doing all the camp routine. I get set up in the second tier of the shelter. Second tiers always kind of give you a little higher up advantage, and the men will usually fill the lower tier before filling the upper tier as a kind of an etiquette thing, unspoken. So I'm getting ready for bed. She's there. She's still cooking. And lo and behold, the guy who could not take another step and was going to die starts hacking his way into camp. And I hear him say to her, look, I made it. And she's like, I thought you were so sick you couldn't go any further. Well, when I heard you were going to go further. And I went, oh, there it is. Are you sleeping in the shelter? We can sleep next to each other. And she said, oh no, I'm hanging my hammock outside. And I thought that was so funny because in the Smokies, like everyone fills a shelter, and if it's overfilled, then you sleep outside, but everyone is all bear feared and they don't want to. But if she was afraid of a bear, she would rather risk the bear than this dude in the shelter. So she camped outside. He ended up coming inside the shelter, and he was trouble in the shelter. He was not great, and I'm just not going to go into that, but her warning was very correct and spot on of I don't want to be near him, don't be near him. And that's a guy who is on death's door, who still thought, I got 5 miles in me, I'm following that. When he followed that woman 5 miles to try to bed down next to her in a shelter. So you think people don't stalk you on a trail? Yeah, they'll do it, and they'll do it when you don't think they possibly could do it. And even though it meant him repacking up his entire bed system, backpack, everything, and picking up and moving on 5 miles and coughing the whole way and showing up hours later, he still did it to follow her. So, and was she some spring chicken out of the box? No, she was like me. She was like some middle-aged person, hiking along a trail in grubby, stinky clothes, but it doesn't matter. If they want to follow you, they'll follow you. So when you're at a shelter and some hiker is saying to you, you got some guy bugging you, just walk off into the woods a couple miles. You think that's a good idea? I never thought that was a good idea. There was never a moment where I thought I should pick up and go, because the only safe place to really go is a place where there are going to be other people, like a big campsite or a big shelter site, and they are 5 to 15 miles apart. And, are you going to get there? What time is it going to be when you get there? And then you got to set up your whole bed system and try to go to sleep again. And what if this dude follows you? They still could. So it's not great advice. The better advice is always camp with someone hike with someone so you can camp with someone and have your pepper spray. That's your best answer to everything. Then you don't have to go. If they don't like it, they can go. But if you're saying something to someone's face and they're not acknowledging it, having a second person, especially hubby, who's coming with me next time, to say, back up, leave her alone. My husband says that, but he's so funny. He goes, if I'd been there, I wouldn't even had to say anything, because you would have felt like you're not alone and these men can't get away with it, so therefore you can be just as bold as you want. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'd be assertive as all hell when I know I'm safe. But when I'm in the middle of the woods alone with no one around, you kind of have to play a chess game of how can you push people away without making them so angry they turn on you. It's like this thing that's going on and they know it. These men know it. They're very aware that they've got you where they want you. They know this campsite. They come here twice a year. They do this all the time. And for the wives, if you're one of these women whose men are going out on these trails for a week at a time with their buddies, this is what they're doing. Reel in your boys, because they're out of control. The next thing that happened was a dog attack. I was on the trail and a family came along with older kids, not young kids, with 2 dogs, one on a leash, one was not on a leash. The one not on a leash, some kind of shepherd, came bolting towards me, jumped up on me, bruised my whole hip, cut my hip open with his toenail, claw, what do you call it? And great, let me just say, the belief pants didn't rip. Even though he tore my skin, the pants held up. So that was great. But he was snapping in my face. They had to pull him off of me. They got injured themselves pulling him off. Then the one woman starting to yell to the kid, like, why didn't you tell me? I would have leashed the dog. And they're having this infight. And then the husband looks at me and goes, are you all right? And I'm crying. And I'm like, no. And he goes, you're injured? And I'm like, yes, I'm hurt really badly. And I'm trying to assess what's going on, and it's out of control. And I'm like, at this point, I need to go. And I've been in dog problems here in Connecticut. And unless you're near a road and can get the police there quickly, people are just going to take off. They're not going to stick around. You don't know who they are, right? So I know there's nothing to do but go. And I just start going down the hill, and I try calling my husband on the cell. And this is always, you have cell coverage 95% of the time, but the 5% you don't is always the worst moments. And this was one of them, and I couldn't reach him on the cell. And I went all the way down the mountain, and I could see a road just over the hump, but there was a water source, and I stopped, and I was still pretty shaken, and I decided I'm just going to depack, and I'm going to get water and drink water and get calm down and then continue on. So I sit down and I'm doing this whole thing, and I'm sitting there. I collect all the water and I start drinking the water, and I'm having a snack. And the 65, I would guess, year old guy, named like a football 65, comes down the trail with his off-leash black poodle dog, and the dog starts coming to me, and I freak out and say, I was just attacked by a dog. I'm injured. Pull back your dog, leash your dog, stay away from me. And I am there. I'm like, don't you dare. And he real slowly hooks up the dog and goes, it's fine. I just read in the ATC newsletter that off-leash dogs are the biggest problem. That must be so hard for you. That's awful. And I'm thinking, yeah, but you got an off-leash dog. What are you talking? He's pretending to sympathize, but he's not really, because he's doing the same exact thing. And then he starts bragging to me about his house over here, and he's got another house up north, and he moves around these houses. Again, the stuff. And his dog, even though on leash, starts coming over to my pack, which is not far from me, sniffing at my pack. And I say, hey, I'm hurt. I need you to back up, and please pull your dog off of my pack. I don't want him near me. I don't want him near my stuff. He doesn't register this at all. He doesn't hear anything that I'm saying. He doesn't care what I'm saying. He's talking to me. I'm talking to you right now, little girl. You're not talking to me. And he just was totally letting the dog in my space. I'm sitting on the ground, and this guy's towering over me, and he's talking about all his stuff, and I'm so overwhelmed, I don't even know what to do. Like, I have no pepper spray, because I could have pulled out pepper spray and said, hey, back up, and that would have been like, oh, lady, you're crazy. But he's fully taken advantage of my misfortune. Like, I'm a mess, I'm shaken, I'm injured, and he's taken advantage of this moment to really push in the way. And then he starts in how good looking you are, and you're so fit, and I'd pick you up if you were hitchhiking. That seems to be the go-to line for everyone. If I saw you hitchhiking, I'd pick you up. I don't know what that's about, but he starts in that trail. Finally, not knowing what else to do and having his dog in my stuff, I just stood up and I decided to claim my backpack from the dog, which is where I get between the dog and my backpack and say, this is mine. And then the dog backs up. That's how I train my own dog. It's like you claim your stuff. And he even backed up, and I said, I'm going. And I packed everything up and went over the hill and was really upset, but didn't want him to see how shaken I was until I kind of made it to the other side of the road and was gone. And I was like, what the holy heck was that? Where you're hurt and injured, and some guy gets in your face and takes advantage of that moment to push his agenda of flirting on you, in your most fragile state, right? What is that about? So, but how can you protect yourself? Oh, that is a random thing. Could that happen to you? Well, maybe not a dog attack, but could you be hurt on the trail, sprained an ankle and sitting down and taking a break? And then one of these guys comes over and kind of like, I know you're hurt, so now I've really got you, Yeah. So if that happens, what do you do? Well, number one, pepper spray would have been perfect. Number two is, I didn't think of it, but by then I probably had cell reception, and I should have at least tried and taken out the phone and hit 911 and turned it to him and said, if you don't back away, I'm hitting the call. The cops have come. The road's right there. That probably would have worked. In that moment of exhaustion and trauma and injury and being totally stressed out, I didn't think of this answer, and you might not either. So make sure you know it now, because if I had worked out this answer ahead of time and faced that situation, I'd have been like, I know exactly what I'm doing. Here's my pepper spray. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit 911. Because the road is right there. That's not always an option, but it was at that moment. So having these kind of answers ready are much more helpful to you than a lot of the stuff people are telling you, which is don't bring pepper spray and you're always safe and everyone's always really nice and everyone helps you out all the time. No, they don't. No, they don't. So, I'm laughing now because for the life of me, I wish I'd remembered these things in the moment, because I would have liked to have done them and had it go a completely different way, because it might have taught these men to back up. The only thing I will say is you're bringing pepper spray, make sure you're carrying it right where you can grab it quickly. I hike here in Connecticut and have trouble with people and dog owners all the time. And I have my pepper spray in the chest, right in the chest strap. And because when you tell a dog owner, hey, leash your dog, they'll, yeah. And then you pull out the pepper spray, they will run to leash their dog. I've never, ever had to deploy pepper spray, but I've pulled it out over a dozen times and watched owners run to leash their dog so quick. I'm not going to spray the owner. I'm going to spray this dog, which I would never want to do because it's the owner's fault. But it's the only way I get a reaction is I'm going to aim this at your dog, and then you're going to hustle. And then I'm going to aim it at you. Get away from me. So that was another really, a really bad one. And that was one that I really have trouble with, because what kind of a creepo do you have to be? But he lived right near there. He told me his house was right there near that area. So he probably scouts these trails looking to harass women. I don't think I was the first one. He knew that area pretty well, because he was talking to me about everything he likes to do. You just be quiet, little girl, and be injured while I talk to you. Little girl. I'm going to say the last one I think I need to talk about that was really crazy is I'd hiked a long day. I always hiked long days. I wanted to see stuff. And it was like a 20-something mile day. I made it down a valley to a shelter. We did have cell reception. I had chatted with hubby. I was the only one there. I pitched my tent behind the shelter in a beautiful little grassy area. There's a stream running. And that night, 2 men came down the trail, white lights on, aimed right into my tent before they went in the shelter. They just kind of stood there for a minute and they weren't talking, and their light was in the shelter. And I thought, this is not through hikers, because through hikers know don't use the white light in camps. You'll tick everybody off and get yelled at. You go to your red light. So I knew right away that they were vacationing weekend hikers. And then they lit up inside the shelter, and I knew, oh, they're partying people on the trail. But it was like a 5-mile hike out. So this other advice of, they won't go more than a mile or two. Well, they went 5 miles to go light up at a shelter and cause trouble. This is where I'm going to get to another really important tip. Women do this a lot, so I want you to hear this. When you wash your cooler cloth, which I actually hate, and I did another video on a multi-towel, when you wash whatever you're using, a lot of women hang that on the outside of their tent at night to dry, or a cooler cloth to try to dry. Watch my other video. But it is a flag that there is a woman inside that tent, and you should not flag who you are in your tent, especially since most people at campsites are men. Why would you want all of them to know where the one woman is? If you're to bed early, as I was before people start, kind of rolling into town, I didn't want any flags on the outside of my tent saying I'm the only woman here. So I always put my multi-towel on the inside of the tent, and whatever. If I was sleeping in a shelter and my backpack was hanging, my shoes are gray, they're not pink. I don't have stuffed animals on the outside of my bag. Some people do that. There's nothing that says I'm a woman inside the sleeping bag. And because I did have a shelter one night where a guy rolled into a shelter and another guy was sitting there, and I had already been in my sleeping bag. It was cold and I was inside. And one of the guys said, hey, who's in that sleeping bag in the shelter? And the other guy said, I don't know. I think they're sleeping. They haven't come out at all. And then the other guy said, well, is it a man or a woman? And the other guy goes, I don't know. They haven't come out at all. And in my sleeping bag, I was thinking, why does this guy need to know if there's a man or a woman inside the shelter? Like, it was even the other guy reacted like, why the hell do you need to know that? We don't know. So I didn't want anything on the outside of my bag that let people know. Like, if I'm alone in a shelter or, people come in later, I don't want them to know who's under that sleeping quilt. I want them to think it's probably a man, because it's mostly men out there. If they see my tent behind the shelter, I want them to think it's probably a man. It's probably not a woman. There's no cooler cloths. There's no stuffed animals. There's no flag giveaways. You don't know who's in there. So these guys, what they did is, after they lit up and partied in the shelter, they started stepping outside of the shelter and aiming their headlamps into my tent, which is maybe 20 feet behind the shelter. And at first I thought maybe they're looking for the privy, because it is off behind me, but they never went to use the privy. And then they went back in the shelter. I don't know if it's the same guy or if they were taking turns, but they would come out and aim the light for 30 to 45 seconds into my tent, and then they'd step back and go in the shelter. And they just kept doing this for about half hour, 45 minutes, just aiming that light into the tent. And I had my husband on the text. I have the SOS button of the Garmin ready, and I have my knife out. And I thought, I don't think they're going to come in the tent, because they'll lose an eye. I'll put out an eye if anyone comes in this tent. Don't pepper spray in your tent. You'll just hurt yourself, but you can put out an eye. So I told my husband, I don't think they're coming in, but I do think they're trying to scare me. And I do think they're trying to figure out, who's going to yell at them and say, hey, stop putting a light on the tent, because then they can see if it's a man or a woman. I said, I think that's what they're trying to do, is figure out who's in the tent. Is this a guy or is this a woman? And if they find out it's a woman, well, then what? Is there well, now we got a plaything. Like, I don't know, but it was so creepy, scary that that was when I said to my husband, come get me tomorrow. I'll be at a hostel. I'm done. I'm not doing this alone anymore. This is just too far. When men are aiming lights into your tent at night, trying to scare you, too far. So what do you do as women so that it doesn't happen to you? Hike with a partner. If my husband had been there in the next tent over, all he would have had to do is yell out and say, hey, get away, and what the hell are you doing? And it would have stopped. It's really having someone to camp with every night, that you can have someone there so you're not all alone. And if you want to, even if he had been there, I would have yelled out, hey, get your light out of my tent, because my husband's in the next tent over, or your best friend is in the next tent over, and they're not going to get away with doing this stuff. But it's being alone out there that's a little more difficult, because you're alone. There is no one else anywhere around here, and you have 2 guys heckling you. What do you do? So I don't want to ruin it for you. Again, this has not been a video about how can I scare you. It's a video about the kind of stuff that happens out there and why you really need to have some idea of what you would do. And picking up and moving, what am I going to do? Pack everything up in that moment and hike 5 miles. It was 5 miles to town. There were no more shelters. But what if these people follow you? They're already trying to intimidate me. They're aiming lights into my tent. If I come out, do they do something then? You know, can I safely pack up? Can I walk to another side? I don't know. That seemed to me to be more dangerous. Leaving the tent seemed more dangerous than staying inside. So that's what I chose to do. But think to yourself, what would you do in maybe not these exact situations, but if this sort of behavior came up, could you handle it? And not just could you mouth off and handle it, but you really quickly realize in that situation that if you say something and you tick somebody off, what might they do back? And that changes the equation in a way we don't have it here in society. And I'm going to say there were times where I was in shelters where this bad behavior went on, and I thought in my head, boy, this just seems like prime ground for assault, and I'll bet you anything it's happened out here. And when I got off trail, I looked it up, and the ATC said, yes, there have been reports of rape out there, and they assume that there have been more than have been reported because women don't do it. And I would agree with that. I would say this is just a prime bad way for men to have an advantage where they normally wouldn't in society, out in the real world. So do be very, very careful that if you are going to hike somewhere alone, that you do have pepper spray. Don't listen to those stupid dreamy through hikers telling you, you don't need it, nobody ever uses it. Well, no, they don't use it, but they have it to pull out so that they don't have to. Again, do it. Go out in the AT. It's amazing. It's so much fun. It's so challenging. It's so unbelievable. The views are, you're going to feel so great about yourself, and you're going to get better every day, and it's going to be an adventure of a lifetime. And I want you to have that, but I want you to be safe. So think of how you would handle these situations. It's okay to fire a shuttle driver and get another one. It's okay to walk out of a hostel. You're going to make this hike the most epic thing of your whole life. And I did 500 miles, and it bothers me now because I know I'd be in Vermont, New Hampshire right now. I know I would have made it. It was just that fantastic, but it was unsafe, and I don't want to be unsafe. I didn't want to have my experience at the end, finish the hike and go, well, that was really great, but I felt unsafe the whole time, and it was kind of frightening every night, because every night I was rolling into campsites and shelter sites thinking, am I going to be okay? And I'd get like a mile away from the shelter, and that heart throb would start to, anxiety would come in of, am I going to be okay? Who's going to be there? Will there be any women there? Maybe there'll be a married couple there. Wouldn't that be nice? You know, and it really didn't happen very often. I was usually the only woman there, and it just was not good. It was not good. And I didn't want that to be my experience on the trail. And I don't want it to be yours. So do it, be safe, take care of yourself, enjoy. I wish you all the best. And I'm sorry it's taken me so long to do this, but now you know why I didn't want to. It's so creepy. All right, bye-bye. People's not scary cemetery, read you in obituary.